being here.
Thank you. Good evening. It's nice to be with you. My name is Susan Stimpson, and I'm chairman of the Stafford County Board of Supervisors. As I'm sure most of you know, we're located just below Prince William County. And I met my husband, Dan, my senior year at Mary Washington. We've been married 20 years this September, and Dan had the opportunity to experience what America has to offer if you're willing to work hard. He enlisted in the Marine Corps when he was 17, and then he was able to attend and graduate from the Naval Academy. So we married after he graduated, and I spent the first 18 years of our marriage as a military spouse. That's another aspect that I'm bringing to the table. It's that lens through which I also govern, that testing and that shaping of those times of moving to different areas. We figured out as a family by the time we had moved back to Fredericksburg in 2005, our family had moved approximately every 1.8 years. And there were certain things that we looked for when we moved into a community. What were the schools like? What were the taxes like? What were the roads like? So those are the things that I think about as I govern and implement the policy, both legislatively and then at the executive level as well. Folks, as Republicans, we have a problem. Because you see, we have all three houses of government here in Virginia. A governor, Republican, and Governor Bob McDonnell, Speaker of the House, and Bill Howell, Republican House of Delegates, and a Republican Senate with Senator Tommy Norman. And we finally come up with a solution to the transportation problem. The Republicans, the largest tax increase in Virginia's history. And just a few months ago, we've been talking about how disappointed we were about the November election. Remember, we were running against President Obama wanting to defeat Obamacare and the expansion of Medicaid. The Republicans have now put that on the table, opening the pathway to the expansion of entitlements. And the silence is deafening. It's deafening from those who are in office. It's deafening from those who are running for office. I do want to commend Pete Surgett for actually speaking out about this, specifically about our leadership. And you see, it's painful to speak on this because they are my friends. But if you're committed to principle, even when your friends are wrong, you have to speak up. And there's a reason, because you see, a limited government keeps the power where it should be, and that's in your hands. For you to make decisions for yourself and for your family. And I can point to a specific record in Stafford County of a limited government. I didn't need an outside agency to come in. I didn't need another mechanism to do it for me. I was the one, along with my fellow board members, who had been given the authority to make the governing decisions for Stafford County. And the first thing the Republicans did when we took the majority on the board, we cut our pay by 25%. You see, what we were doing? We were laying a marker in the sand and letting everyone know what was coming. There was going to be pain. We were going to share in it with them. The second thing we did, the second thing we did was we eliminated an onerous business tax called BPOL. We're the largest county in the Commonwealth of Virginia to not charge that tax. And believe it or not, in the time of recession, and in the time when millions of dollars are being passed down in mandates from the General Assembly, which that will also speak to the car tax, sir, that was quietly capped. The Gilmore tax relief was quietly capped by the General Assembly. So the costs to the people have risen. That tax has basically been reinstated. What we did in this recession for 3 years in a row, we have lowered and cut overall real estate taxes. Not just proposed budgets, not just proposed taxes, but actually below the equalized rate, putting $11 million back into the economy and back into Stafford families' hands so they can make decisions for themselves and their family. We took our general admin staff and we cut the personnel down to 2004 levels. We targeted and we focused the priorities of our budget toward public safety, education, transportation projects that were approved by the voters, but all done within a debt capacity that has been lowered each year. And you would have thought that the sky was going to fall and the world was going to end, and I can tell you that even today, the teachers' union in Stafford County is very strong. And what I have experienced is what I know many officials experience. It is hard cutting taxes and cutting spending and cutting personnel. And the unions are strong, even though we say we don't have unions in Virginia. There are actually 159,000 members of trade associations here in Virginia. There are strong lobbies. There are pressures for elected officials so they can hold on to that power, so they can get elected in the next election, to just raise a tax here, just spend a little more. But you and I both know the impacts of this recession on our families. Our family's taking a pay cut with what's happened in this recession. The last thing I want to do is to burden families more with more taxes. The sky didn't fall in Stafford County and the world didn't end. In fact, Stafford County is thriving because of a limited government. We jumped that next year after cutting people to #1 in job growth. We've had millions of dollars each year in economic surplus that has allowed us to lower taxes in many ways. We've zeroed out a tax service district. We've eliminated one, in particular, impact fee. We've reduced the boat tax. And I just made the motion to chop that car tax that we have in Stafford County significantly by over $3 million. And I'm going to fight to see that implemented, because I believe a limited government gives you that freedom and that liberty. And understanding the core of liberty and freedom, it's that God-given right of making decisions for yourself so that you can be the best and the most that God intended you to be. I'm not a career politician, but I can tell you this much: I am not afraid to lose my next election. I'm a mother of 2 children, though, and I'm fighting for something that's bigger than just this election. Because what freedom is next? If now Republicans are caving on these freedoms, it is time for someone to draw a line in the sand and say, no more. You are not going any further. I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you for your time.
As you can see, this is not Mark Obenshain.
Hi everybody, my name is Kate Obenshain and I am Mark's much younger sister. I am so honored to be here with you on Mark's behalf. Thank you for letting me come and represent him. I'm honored because, for one, Mark stands with all of you, incredible human beings who are sacrificing EW, and I thank all of you for what you're doing and the time that you're putting into preserving freedom. We have some great choices, and I'm particularly proud because I think the #1 characteristic that we need in our elected leaders right now, both at the federal level and at the state level, is courage. It's something that is so heartbreakingly lacking. And I know it breaks your heart. It broke my heart last year during the entire presidential contest, and it broke my heart when the Republicans sided with the tax increase this year. It breaks my heart because we are working so hard, and then to see people turn their backs on our principles, it is devastating. And I want you to know that Mark has stood firmly in favor of limited government from the day he set his toe into politics as a college Republican at Virginia Tech. Well, we've all been involved much longer than that, but he himself got involved then. And I was so proud of him back in 2004. He had just been elected in 2003, and at the time, the largest tax increase in Virginia history was proposed. Patsy remembers it. We were on State Central together at the time. Governor Warner decided that he was going to solve all of our transportation woes and push through this massive tax increase. Well, Mark, newly elected state senator, and 5 other Republican senators, including Steve Martin, stood up against the Democrat governor's tax plan. Now, why was it so hard for Republicans to stand up against this? Well, because Mark Warner was the golden child and nobody was willing to push back. Well, we pushed back and pushed back hard, and Mark and Ken Cuccinelli stood shoulder to shoulder fighting against that tax increase. You know, you did notice, by the way, it went through and it has not solved all of our transportation woes, as tax increases never, ever will. But Mark stood up for that, and you know what? He was, I believe, the only senator to stand up. Remember in 2009, 2010, when Barack Obama handed us the massive stimulus funds. All we had to do was accept these millions and millions of dollars. Well, Mark stood up on the floor of the state senate and said, we don't want it here in Virginia. Because what happens when you accept government money is you expand your programming and then you're stuck holding the bill as soon as the stimulus funding ends, which it does. It expands the size of our government. And Mark had the courage to say, no, we do not want it. You know, it is hard. Susan is exactly right. The hardest thing is to stand up against your fellow Republicans. It is devastating. It is so hard to do. Trust me, I did it. And I took the wrath from all of those Republican senators. Oh my gosh, they still won't speak to me. But that's okay. You've got to do it. You've got to have the courage. And you've got to realize that we're in it for something bigger than ourselves. Mark has been a stalwart on gun rights, on pro-life. He carried he's responsible for the voter ID. Finally, you have to show and prove who you are. What a novel concept. Bell are responsible for the Property Rights Amendment. We're so proud for that. Concealed carry, for preventing your names from being published in the newspaper. That was Mark's bill. If you really have to have your name in the newspaper because you own a lawful weapon, that is ridiculous. It is an offense. Teacher tenure. Oh, this is another great moment of courage on Mark's part. The day that the teacher unions were down visiting in Virginia, Mark gave a speech against teacher tenure. Can you imagine what happened with that? He stood firmly because we believe in principles. He did it diplomatically. He made sense. It wasn't poking him in the eye, but it was saying, enough of this. We're not going to sacrifice our children's education because it is too important for the influence of the unions. He also stood for the Project Labor bill that prevented any state money going to a union-only contract. Again, what a novel idea that in a right-to-work state, we would give state money to government-only, union-only contracts. Mark said, no way. Again and again, he's willing to stand up. Also, I will tell you, Mark, this is practical, but we need to talk about practical just for a minute. I prefer to talk about soaring rhetoric. But you know what? When you're Attorney General, your number one job is to run one of the biggest law firms in Virginia. Mark has done that. He doesn't need on-the-job training. He has run 2 large law firms in Virginia. He has taken on the tough cases. He's handled over 100 constitutional cases during his 25-year career. And he has argued at all levels, from the Supreme Court of the United States, Virginia Supreme Court Appeals Court, all the way down. He knows what he's doing, and he's willing to take on the very tough cases. But I want to tell you, I'm happy to talk more about practicality afterwards, so grab me, because I can go on and on about it. I want to tell you why Mark does what he does and why I do what I do, but this is about Mark. When my dad died, when Mark was 16, I was 9. Mark really became the head of the family at that point. A lot of you know my dad was Dick Obenshain and was running for the United States Senate. And we found a very well-worn piece of paper. And on that piece of paper was my father's goal. His goal in life, and it has motivated both Mark and me for our entire lives. And it said, the most important goal in my life is to have some significant impact on expanding and preserving the realm of personal freedom in the life of this country. And you know what is so amazing about that is my dad wasn't just interested in protecting the freedoms that we've got now. It was an audacious goal in that he wanted to expand them. Because you know what, our founding fathers gave us this, it was a covenant that we get to keep the freedom that God gave us. They didn't give it to us, God gave it to us. And our founding fathers established this covenant between the individual and government and said, we will not take from you any freedoms that you don't willingly give us. Well, our current administration and Democrats and yes, some Republicans are breaking that covenant. We want not only to protect and preserve the freedoms that we have, we want to boldly and audaciously expand them. To stand in the gap and say to Barack Obama and anyone else, state and or federal, the Attorney General has to take them both on. We want to say no more. You will not take any more of our freedom. And in fact, we want to take some of it that you've already stolen from us, and we want to take it back. That is an audacious goal. Consider Mark because he is an audacious conservative and he has never let me down, and I promise you, he will never let Virginia down. Thank you all so much. God bless.